Hi, I'm Amy Murin. I'm going to kick off today by giving you a little bit of a national landscape on K-12 online and blended learning, and then I'm going to hand it over to Julie, who's going to dig in and talk a lot about what's happening right here in Ohio. You'll have to forgive me. I think I'm one of about half the attendees at this conference who are getting over this cold, so if you have a hard time hearing me, I apologize. I'm going to hang on to my tea and hopefully do okay. I'm going to start by telling you a story. I'm a skier. I grew up outside of Chicago, so saying I'm a skier is kind of a bold statement. And this is where I grew up skiing. This is Wilmot Mountain in southern Wisconsin. Has anybody been to Wilmot? Hey, a hand in the back. I love it. Wilmot has a vertical drop of 190 feet, 120 skiable acres, and the longest run is a half a mile. When I was a kid, I was in a Saturday morning ski group, and 3 busloads of us would head up to southern Wisconsin. If there was actual real snow, which was pretty rare, the lift lines would get so long that we could throw our skis over our shoulders and run up the side of the hill in our ski boots faster than we could wait in the lift line. But it didn't matter. All we cared about is that we had access to skiing in southern Wisconsin, an hour and a half from home. However, as I grew up, I realized that having access to skiing wasn't quite enough. This is what I skied last weekend. This is Vail Resorts. It has a vertical drop of 3,500 feet, 5,000 skiable acres, and its longest run is 4 miles long. Now, I have to tell you, in the middle of that run, my legs would have been thrilled for that half mile at Wilmot because my legs got pretty darn tired. But having access to high-quality skiing became really important to me, and it's what drove my decision to move to Colorado after college. Surprisingly, this all does come around to online and blended learning, because the reality is that student access to online and blended learning is still driven by zip code. Many of you probably work for school districts. The reason you probably came today is because you work for districts that have some form of online and blended learning, or you're interested in getting involved. And so to us, it seems like it's ubiquitous, but that's not the case. And the reality is that for many students, they simply just don't have access. So 2 of the themes I'm going to talk with you about today are access, and then we're going to dig in just a little bit to quality and talk about quality in online learning. This year, Florida became the first state to get all of these bubbles filled in on what we call our state table. So on the left side in the turquoise or greenish, you see where students have access to supplemental online options, so supplemental courses. If you saw Heather Staker this morning keynote, she talked about students being able to take maybe 1 online course and supplement their traditional brick and mortar high school schedule. On the right side, you see the full-time options, the red options, where students have access to fully online education. The bubbles get filled in based on whether or not most students in that state have access to those options and if they're taking advantage of those options. Florida's the first to have all those bubbles filled in. The surprising one there and the new one there is supplemental options at the elementary level. We're anxious to see what that looks like in the coming years as students have access to supplemental online classes at an elementary level. Far more typical is a state like Illinois, which has a state virtual school that offers supplemental online classes primarily to high schoolers, some middle schoolers as well, but doesn't make any fully online options available for students. Or your home state of Ohio, where you have fully online options widely available to students, and in fact, you serve the most students with a fully online program of any state in the country, but there are very few supplemental options available to students even at a high school level, just a few district programs that are making courses available to students. The information I'm going to share with you today comes from our annual report, Keeping Pace with K-12 Online and Blended Learning. You see on the bottom of this slide the 14 sponsors who provide the time and resources and funding for us to be able to publish this report. They're a mix of public, private, and nonprofit agencies who believe that it's important to make this information available to students. And so our goal is to share information about what programs students have access to and what trends we're seeing around the country so that we can learn from each other as this field grows. Blended is in our title for the first time, which is appropriate because it's our theme for today, blended learning. And so I'm going to talk about blended learning today just a little bit. What we have started to see is that blended learning is the umbrella over all of the different program types that I'll dig into. It is being incorporated into state virtual schools. State virtual schools typically offer 1 or 2 supplemental courses to students. Students take 1 or 2 courses and blend it into their traditional brick and mortar environment. We're seeing multi-district fully online programs that have recognized that students might want access to a face-to-face experience with a teacher at a learning center or at a school. And so they're starting to create blended programs. And in fact, Connections Education has opened 3 blended learning schools in Ohio just in the last year because they recognize that not all students want a fully online option. And then we're seeing many single district programs that are expanding their blended learning options for students. And so blended learning is really becoming this umbrella over all of the different program types. And as we talk about the different program types today, you'll hear that that blended and online apply in all cases. If you saw Heather this morning, you'll actually see that I have an outdated version of their definition of blended learning. If you were paying close attention, she told me I'm too wonky and that I need to not try to keep up with her. But InnoSight defines blended learning as a merging of the online and brick and mortar worlds. The keys in this definition, in the top part, that in that online delivery, students have some control over time, place, path, or pace. It's not just about technology. One-to-one initiatives are not necessarily blended learning. Sometimes they are when they're well implemented, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's blended learning. With the brick and mortar component of the definition, we think it's critical that that experience is supervised. And so it's not just about a student showing up at a library or a school and working in a computer lab, but it's a supervised experience in a school. Keeping pace takes that definition just a little bit further, and what's interesting is that Heather's definition actually now takes some of these factors into account. Keeping pace adds a meaningful online component, so the curriculum is being delivered online. It's not just homework or assignments or a calendar, but that students are actually learning their curriculum in the online environment. We also believe that significant supervised on-site component is critical. And last but not least, the element Heather added in her definition this morning that'll be in the next white paper they release is data. That blended learning allows us to access data about students so that we can personalize the educational experience for all students. Now let's dig into the first program type, and let's talk about state virtual schools. State virtual schools are state-funded or state-managed or started by a state. Ohio does not have a state virtual school, although you do have iLearn Ohio, which is the state-led initiative. And so it is bringing resources together and making them available to students and teachers around the state. But at this point, we don't consider it a straight state virtual school. 27 states have state virtual schools as of this school year. There were 29, and 2 have closed in the last year. State virtual schools served over 620,000 course enrollments last school year. We define a course enrollment as one student enrolled in one online course. So it's those students who are just supplementing their brick and mortar experience with one online course. It might be an AP class. It might be a core class, and they're simply opening up time in their schedule by taking it online. What you see circled up in the top left there is the enrollment number for Florida Virtual School, which I'm sure you've heard about. If you've heard anything about online learning, you've probably heard about FLVS. They served over 300,000 course enrollments last year, so almost half the enrollments in state virtual schools last year came through Florida Virtual School. The gray graphic on the right side shows the ratio to the state population. Florida is still serving by far the most percentage of students in the state, and it's serving about 15% of the students in the state through its state virtual school. However, a state like New Hampshire, which only served 15,000 course enrollments last year, also served about 12% of its state's student population, its high school student population. So even though it's a lower number of enrollments, it's doing a great job of serving its students and opening up the course catalog. In my home state of Colorado, the numbers are way lower, and it's a far lower percentage of that state population. And we're increasingly seeing state virtual schools bifurcate into two different groups, where they are either well supported and well funded, like Florida, North Carolina, a lot of those southern states that are a darker red indicating that they have more enrollments. And then there are a number of state virtual schools that simply aren't well supported and are either closing or staying at the same level of enrollments. Multi-district fully online schools. In most states, these are our charter schools. In Ohio, it's the e-community schools, e-schools. And these states are serving students typically statewide or at least in multiple districts with a fully online education. And so now we're no longer just talking about high school, we're talking about grades K through 12. Fully online education was available to students statewide in 31 states last year. You can see those states highlighted in red. And as you can see, this is where you get to be proud. Ohio has the largest bubble there because it has the largest number of fully online students at 35,391. Arizona, we estimated, served about 39,000. They actually came in at about 39,500. There are two reasons that number is tough to compare with Ohio. One is that it's an estimate because they actually don't have a count of all students enrolled in fully online programs because so many of their students come up through single district programs that don't have to report to the state. And also because Arizona is a unique count of students taking either a part-time or a fully online education from any of a number of approved providers. So Ohio is the big winner in this one, serving the most students through the e-community schools. There were 275,000 students enrolled in fully online programs last year. Now let's talk about single district programs. And these are a lot tougher to put our arms around. And so this is perhaps my most boring slide for you. What we know is that there are a number of reports and studies that have come together in the last couple of years that are starting to give us an idea of what kind of online and blended learning is happening at a district level. But these single district programs don't have to report up to the state. If you're simply focused on serving your students with a different teaching methodology, you don't have to report that up to the state and tell them and report those enrollments. And so it's hard for us to know how many students are being served, whether it's fully online or single supplemental courses or in some form of blended learning. What we do know is that NCES, the National Center for Education Statistics, released a report about 15 months ago that estimated that 55% of districts around the country were involved in some form of distance learning. However, about 3/4 of those districts are serving less than 75 students. So Heather, again, this morning, talked about the areas of non-consumption in education and serving students with credit recovery or AP classes, finding ways to meet the needs of students who are on the fringe a little bit. I've highlighted a few of the district programs that I'm aware of in Ohio around here, and actually we'll talk again about district programs in just a minute. I know there are more out there, and I'd actually love to hear from you. If you work for a district program that I don't have listed up here, we include district programs and all programs in each state in a graphic in the state profile for keeping pace each year, and I'd love to add your program. Come up and grab a card from me later, and let's exchange information so that I can get your program into our database. And actually, this is the graphic I was talking about. What you can see here in this very complicated graphic, on the left side, you see whether a program is a single district program, so just serving students within a district, and those are the programs right along the bottom here of the graphic. In the middle, we have multi-district programs, and along the top, we have statewide programs. Along the bottom, the columns are whether a program is supplemental, full-time, or both. All those red bubbles in there indicate that you have a lot of charter schools that are serving students in a fully online environment. The blue bubbles in the bottom left note that there are some single district programs that are serving students within those districts. So we know that there's a lot we don't know about Ohio and that we have a lot to learn. Again, come share information with me. I'd be delighted to get you into Keeping Pace 2013. Now let's shift gears. We talked about access, and now let's shift gears and talk about quality for just a few minutes. there have been a lot of negative headlines about online and blended learning in the last couple of years. The Dallas Independent School District signed a contract last year with Reasoning Mind to bring math software into its elementary schools, a $1.3 million contract. And at their fall board meeting, they realized that the results, the assessment results, didn't go up in the way that they would have liked to have seen. When they dug in, they realized that Reasoning Mind had recommended that students spend 70 hours in the software program over the course of the year, and the average student spent about 30 hours in the program. And so it's not surprising that the results weren't quite where they expected. They've signed for another year, another one-year contract, so we'll have to wait and see what that looks like. But in our work with districts around the country, what we see are that so often districts either rush to implement online and blended learning, or that they simply don't put enough thought into their planning. And so we do a lot of work with districts to try to help them create high-quality online and blended programs. And this is question number one. What educational goal are you trying to meet? Are you trying to differentiate for students? Are you trying to expand a course catalog? Are you trying to meet the needs of credit recovery students or advanced students? Identifying that primary educational goal will then drive the answers to all of the questions you need to create a high-quality online and blended program. In Keeping Pace, which, by the way, you all better walk out with a print copy of Keeping Pace today because I don't want to bring them home in the airplane with me, we have a section called Planning for Quality, and actually I also have that section as a separate printout. Planning for Quality guides program administrators through a planning process, a strategic planning process that asks all of the questions we think you need to be asking in order to create that high-quality online or blended program. It starts with an organized strategic planning process where you determine what grade levels will be served, if it's full-time or supplemental, will you follow the school calendar, will you follow the bell schedule, what will you be using in-house teachers, or will you be outsourcing your teaching, and digs into questions in 4 different areas that help to start to fill in the blanks about what that program will look like. The 4 categories are content, teaching, technology, and operations. And we offer a series of questions within those 4 areas, and then a very specific timeline that will walk you through when you should be asking certain questions and at what time of year. Yeah?
That's in that book.
Yep, I have those up here. Take as many as you'd like. At £1 each, they're not going to my suitcase. I also, by the way, am speaking in this room at 2:30, and we'll dig in a lot more to the details about what planning for quality looks like. And so if you'd like to join me at 2:30, we'll dig in and figure out those details. The bottom line is that every program is different. There are a number of programs out there that are seeing good results with students. There are some great models out there that are really working. Those models may or may not work for you, your school, your students, your district. And so by answering all of these questions for what you have in your district, we hope that you will create a high-quality program for students. And now I'm going to hand it over to Julie and let her dig into the details about what is happening in Ohio. So let me just scoot out and get to your presentation and get out of your way.
Amy?
Mm-hmm.
We'll get this started, folks. So I am Julie Evans. I'm the CEO of Project Tomorrow, and I'm thrilled to be here. This is my first time at this conference, and what a lovely opportunity I have to share the stage with Amy. So nice to always learn about the results from Keeping Pace. We use their results all the time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you some of the results from Speak Up, the national research project that we conducted last fall, and what some of the results are from Ohio. So before I get started, how many folks here in the room are already familiar with the Speak Up National Research Project? So a few. Oh, great. Wonderful, thank you. What I'm going to do is I'll tell you a little bit about it to make sure we're all on the same level playing field. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you what I call as a Speak Up snack. We're a little bit after lunch, maybe a little bit before snack time, and so I'm going to give you a couple little data points from the Ohio results, maybe to sort of pique your curiosity, and then I'll tell you how we're going to share that later on, but then also to give you some food for thought, shall we say, as you go to other sessions and other keynotes here at the conference, to think about what your students are saying about the use of technology, what parents are saying, and what teachers and administrators are thinking about. We already had a wonderful introduction about Project Tomorrow, so I'll skip that part. So, in case you are not familiar, Speak Up is a national research project. It's conducted through online surveys and focus groups. We've been doing this since 2003. It's a unique research project for two key reasons. First, we do not limit or identify up front the schools and districts that can participate in Speak Up. In fact, we make it available to any K-12 school district, charter, magnet, parochial, private, virtual, e-schools, whatever it might be, can utilize our online surveys to collect data from their K-12 students, their parents, their teachers, and their administrators. The second reason that Speak Up is unusual or different than other research projects is that we give back to all of the participating schools and districts their own locally collected data and the national data to be able to use for benchmarks and comparatives. We take the national data and share it in conferences as well as with the U.S. Department of Education and Congress and many other federal agencies. As you can see, we've had quite a few surveys submitted to us since 2003. The questions on the surveys are what you would expect. They're about learning and teaching with technology. We have different questions of different audiences, of course, but we ask all the respondents to comment for us on what they are doing with some emerging technologies, whether that is online or blended learning or mobile devices or e-textbooks or social media. And we also ask the respondents to talk to us about their value proposition around these different technologies and their aspirations for using them. So we tend to get a 360-degree perspective in terms of what the stakeholders are thinking about. So the data I'm going to share with you is from our Speak Up surveys that were open last fall. We had about 466,000 surveys that were submitted nationwide, and you can see the breakdown there between the K-12 students, the teachers, the parents, the different flavors of administrators. I am absolutely thrilled to tell you that we had a wonderful partnership this year with Ohio, and Ohio came in as number 3. Look at this, Sandy, huh? In terms of the number of surveys that were submitted to us nationwide. Very, very impressive in terms of results. You had a little bit over 53,000 online surveys that were submitted here in the state, and you can see the breakdown there in terms of the students, the teachers, the parents, and the school and district administrators. So I did bring with me today some of our national data, but most of it is Ohio-specific data. So as I said, in our Speak Up snack, we're going to take a little bit of a walk through and talk about some of the mobile devices and what's happening with mobile learning. We're going to talk about online and blended learning. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about digital content and social media, just to give you a well-rounded snack perspective. So let's talk a little bit about mobile learning. This happens to be one of the favorite slides whenever I present this data. This is your Ohio data. We asked the students, as well as the teachers, parents, and administrators, what mobile devices they have personal access to. We also asked them what mobile devices are provided to them by their school, but this particular chart is about personal access. So you can see here in Ohio, which very closely mimics our national data, we definitely have hit a tipping point in terms of high school students carrying a smartphone. 74% of your high school students said they had a smartphone. And we continue to see smartphones outpacing, shall I dare say, dumb cell phones or cell phones that don't have internet access. The real story, however, is in the growth of tablets, and you all know that because you're living with that every day. So look there at that green bar under above tablets. 50% of your middle school students told us last year they had personal access to a tablet. Now again, that's very close to my national number. My national number for middle school students is 52%, which was a pure doubling from 2011 to 2012. And folks, there really should be an asterisk on this slide. Our surveys closed this year on December 21st. So we don't have anything that Santa brought in his bag included in this number. We asked students about the obstacles they face using technology in school, and it is no surprise, just as we see nationally here in Ohio, our middle school and high school students telling us not being able to use their mobile device, not being able to access their social media, and there are just way, way too many rules that are inhibiting their ability to leverage the potential of these tools that they think are so important for their learning and personal lives. Now, we also asked a new question this year. We asked students about their awareness of social media and mobile device use policies. And good news here, 98% of your students said, yes, we absolutely know what the policy is. Equally interesting is that where you have a policy of no access, no mobile devices to be used in class, and no social media, a third of your high school students tell us that they're using them anyway. Before you get panicked, that's exactly what my national numbers told us as well. We do know that students want to be able to use their own mobile devices, and as you can see here, a majority of your middle school and high school students say they want to use their own mobile device, and over a third of your upper elementary students, who again have the devices, want to be able to use them in school. We ask students, how do you want to use these mobile devices, or why are they important to your learning life? Not your personal life, your learning life. And basically it falls into two primary categories. Students want to use these devices to increase the effectiveness of how they do school now. They want to check grades, get class information, maybe create some presentations, access those online textbooks. I think it's a little bit more interesting in terms of how the students tell us they want to use the features and functionality of these devices to personalize their learning lives, whether that is to collaborate using their social networking site, collaborating on school projects, to be able to watch a video to help with homework, or to use those mobile apps to stay better organized. Now for the students, their philosophy is very clearly, it is not a one-to-one paradigm. They actually look at it and believe that multiple devices are essential to their lives because they can use them for different types of tasks. So if they're talking about creating a presentation, a laptop is the best tool for that. If they're interested in reading a book or an article, they're enamored with the idea of having a digital reader. If they want to take notes in class, they want to use a tablet, and for communication, the smartphone is their choice device. Now, parents are also increasingly mobilist. In fact, 2/3 of the parents in our sampling size here in Ohio said that they were mobile users, either a smartphone or a tablet user. And so that's starting to change the perspective that parents have about the use of mobile devices. So we asked a really interesting question on this past survey. We asked parents if there was two classes that were comparable for your child to be in. One allowed your child to use his or her own mobile device and the other one did not. How likely is it that you would want your child to be in the class where they could use their own mobile device? 2/3 of Ohio parents said it is likely that they would want their child in that class, and as you can see, 43% said very likely. Again, very close to our national numbers. We know that, of course, the BYOD, BYOT, whichever flavor you want to call it, trend has totally taken off in the last 18 months, and our Speak Up data validates this. In 2011, we asked administrators what their policy was relative to bring your own device or bring your own technology to school, and then we repeated that question in 2012. So whereas in 2011, 52% of national administrators said they did not allow BYOD, that number had dropped to 37% in 2012, and now 28% of administrators nationwide are doing some evaluation of BYOD or BYOT. So let's talk now about virtual and online learning, and I also brought some of our brand new blended learning data as well. We know that districts are tapping into many different kinds of online learning here in the state of Ohio. The use of online teacher professional development continues to be number one, not only here in Ohio, but actually nationwide across all the different states. It seems to be a point of entry for many districts in terms of online learning. But we continue to see growth in blended learning. We see in fully online classes. We even see schools and districts that are setting up fee-based online summer schools. We asked the students themselves about their online learning experiences, and this is pertinent to fully online classes. We see here about 4% of your middle school students, about 7% of your high school students are enrolled in some type of a fully online school. Other ones are taking self-study class, some are in a teacher-led online class. Where we actually see the growth nationwide, and it's reflected here in our Ohio numbers as well, is students taking online classes on their own outside of school to supplement what they're doing in their traditional class. And I think Amy mentioned this. So what we actually see is students that are in algebra in a traditional brick and mortar school, and they're also taking algebra in an online class to supplement what is happening in their school environment. As you can see here, about a third of your students, a little bit more than a third of your students in middle school and high school that have not taken an online class are very interested in doing so as well. Now, the reasons that students tell us they're interested in taking online actually demonstrates a split that we see between middle school students and high school students. For high school students, it continues to be about taking that class not offered, the convenience of scheduling, or maybe to get college credit. Middle school students, when we talk to middle school students, and I've actually done several focus groups on this with middle school students, have a different perspective. They actually look at the value of taking an online class as putting them in the driver's seat, shall we say, in terms of driving their own educational destiny, to truly be able to set that pace and place of learning for themselves. So they actually have a different perspective on the value of online learning. A lot of times that's coming from their parents. So we asked a new question this year on the survey. We asked parents about their own personal experiences with taking online classes. And here you can see from your Ohio parents, 46% of them say they have taken some type of an online class for work or job training. Some have done it for academic programs. And a quarter of them that have not taken an online class say that they would like to. Now let's talk a little bit about blended learning. We actually did a very interesting question on this year's survey where we took some of the Insight definitions, looked at our good friends from Evergreen in terms of their definitions, and crafted an interesting question for administrators in more detail than what you see here, where we laid out several different versions of blended learning and asked Ohio administrators as well as the national administrators to comment on which one best represented what they had happening in their school. And so you can see 54% of Ohio administrators said that their instruction was still primarily face-to-face with some usage of online tools and resources. Now, some of the other ones that Amy talked about in terms of having that supervised instruction, having it either in a brick or mortar setting or in an online setting where there still is supervision by teachers, you can see the breakdown there for smaller percentage points. We think it's going to be very interesting to repeat this question over several years and see what the growth is in some of these specific areas to really identify what seems to meet the needs of schools and districts nationwide as well as here in Ohio. Now we asked administrators, so what's holding back your adoption of online learning in any one of the different versions, whatever that might possibly be for you? And so echoing back to some of the things that Amy said, of course, creating online courses that are academically rigorous, concern about the quality of the student-teacher interaction. Now this is very interesting because one of the things that we have also found is that nationwide about 50% of administrators tell us they've taken some type of an online course themselves and that the quality of that course has not met their expectations. So that then is driving administrators to start thinking about, well, if the interaction I had wasn't what I expected and wasn't at the quality I wanted, I need to maybe as an administrator be more concerned about that interaction with whatever type of online learning I bring into my school. The other one that I think is really interesting is that still there is this issue about finding teachers that are interested or skilled to teach in an online environment. And part of that is also a numbers problem. So for example, here in Ohio, only 16% of the teachers that we polled said that they would be interested in teaching an online class. Now remember, back to our demand component, we have a much greater demand from the students. Remember, over a third of the students said they want to take an online class. So we have a mismatch between the demand and the supply in terms of that need for teachers to teach online. I want to share with you just a little bit about digital content and social media before we close up here. We are watching very closely as today's students are doing what we call DIY learning with social media, kind of their do-it-myself learning using social media outside of school. So they are involved with Twitter now more than they ever have been before. Many are going out and finding, as I mentioned before, an online class to take on their own. They're using mobile apps to drive some of their educational interest areas. And almost a third of them have gone out to the internet and found a video to help them with homework, what we're calling the Khan Academy effect. It's also very interesting, I'll make a side note here, it's very interesting that we also see parents are increasingly, by the way, going to Khan Academy to, shall we say, brush up their math skills. so that then when their children come home and need help in math, the parents are once again familiar with algebra and geometry. We also find that students are using Facebook as a student or project collaboration site. Now, parents, again, as I mentioned, are also social media users. They're sending text messages, they're updating a social networking site, they're using Skype or iChat. 18% are part of an online community. We thought this area of sending text messages was particularly interesting because we saw a lot of growth in that from 2011 to 2012. So one of the other questions we asked on last year's survey is we asked parents how they would like their child's teacher or school to communicate with them in an ongoing basis. And interestingly, over a third of Ohio parents want text messages from their child's teacher and school, echoing what they're doing in their personal life, bringing that sort of social media into their interaction with their child's teacher. Now, we also asked teachers about the types of digital content that they are using in their classroom. We continue to see increases every year in the use of videos that they have found online that make sense to bring into their instructional plan. That's echoed here in Ohio as well. And that led us to ask some questions, new questions this year about flipped learning. And so I think this one is very, very interesting. It actually very closely mirrors our national data as well. So we asked teachers about their experience with flipped learning. Are you doing this? Are you using videos that you create yourself, or are you using videos that you're finding online? Maybe the Khan Academy videos, for example. And so we see here amongst Ohio teachers, about 5% say that they are doing this with their own videos. About 2% are doing it with videos they find online. What I think is fascinating is that when we asked Ohio principals, as we did nationally, asked Ohio principals about the experiences that their teachers are having, they have a much greater vision that their teachers are doing more flipping than they actually are. So I think we need to do a little bit more investigative work. I might want to do some focus groups on why there is that disconnect between principals' perceptions and teachers' reality. I think the bigger part of the story is the concern points that are brought up here. For both teachers and principals, they're concerned about student home access to the internet, and they also are looking for very specific professional development to help them be able to take advantage of flipped learning because of the interests that they have. Now, the students say, when we gave them a definition of flipped learning, and we did spell out what that meant from a definition standpoint, they said they're very interested in it. It seems to match some of the ways that they want to learn. So what I want to do is end up with one bit of, or a series of bits of Speak Up Snack data for you. And it's one of my favorite questions on the survey. The question that we ask every year on the survey is we ask the students, the teachers, the parents, and the administrators, if you could design the ultimate school for today's learner, what type of technology do you think would have the greatest impact on learning? It is a favorite question also of superintendents and school board members all across the country, because it gives you, in a snapshot standpoint, an opportunity to see if you have a shared vision for digital learning in your school or district. Is everybody on the same page? We know from all of the research on implementation success is that having all your stakeholders on the same page, having the same value proposition, marching to the same tune, is a key component of a successful implementation. So this question gives superintendents, administrators, teachers, parents, school board members visibility into, are we on the same page? So I picked a couple key data points for you to take a look at. This is all Ohio data. And what I brought with me is the viewpoint of district administrators, school site principals, teachers, parents, and students. So let's look at a couple of these. And we don't even have to get into the numbers here. We can actually just see if the bars are lined up. So let's take a look at tablets right up at the top. We see that the bars are very closely aligned with one another. So the idea of providing tablets within classrooms for student use is something that all of those key stakeholder groups here in the state of Ohio are very supportive of. But let's take a look at something a little bit different. Let's look at games, for example. So the idea of academic or educational-based games is something that has been talked about for quite a while. We see students are very enthusiastic about bringing that sort of gaming technology into the classroom. Teachers are increasingly buying into it. Administrators are a little bit more hold back, and parents are much more reticent to buy into that. Same thing in terms of looking at BYOD. We see that students are out in front on that. So if I was looking at this data from an administrator standpoint, I would say, for example, if I was going to move forward with bringing academic or educational games into my school or into my district as a key part of my instructional plan, I would need to maybe do some homework on the views of parents and be able to figure out how we bring them up to speed so that we have that shared vision. You can see the same thing there in terms of social media. So it's a nice snapshot slide in terms of thinking about, do you have a shared vision, and what does that mean in terms of impacting your implementation? A lot more Speak Up data is available on our website, tomorrow.org. We have a whole series of our national reports that we release every year to Congress. We'll be doing that this year in April and May. We also do a series of thematic reports each year. If you are interested, our online learning report that we released last June was a 5-year retrospective on online learning. You can get that from our website. We also just last Thursday in Texas released a brand new report on pre-service teachers, expectations, and experiences with using technology. So if you are a hiring administrator and wondering what's happening in our schools of education, this might be a very interesting report for you to take a look at. We also have quite a few presentations, podcasts, webinars, all sorts of stuff that's up on our website. I'm also pleased to tell you that in working here with the state of Ohio, our good folks in eTech, we are going to be putting together a series of webinars specifically for Ohio schools and districts, where we will be looking in more depth at some of this Ohio data. We'll be doing that in March and April, and we're going to work on some dates, and so keep in mind that we'll be getting that information out to you. I do have up here, I brought some of our Speak Up 2011 data, because we don't have our 2012 data in report format yet, but if you want some of our 2011 data, an infographic here on student and parent point of views, I have some of those. And if you'd like me specifically to send this presentation directly to you, I'm happy to do that. You can sign up here, or if you want to receive information directly from us about Speak Up or about this webinar series, you can sign up here as well. So with that, I think I am done, and it's just at 2 o'clock. So thank you so much, folks. It was great being here. It was wonderful being here with Amy as well.
And please come grab a copy of Keeping Safe.
Yes, we have things that we don't want to take back. So
Exactly.
Thanks, folks.